Hey there, hospital executives. My name's Danny Mobley. I'm the founding CEO of Humans of Healthcare. And on today's interview, we'll hear from Marshall Shannon. Marshall's the proprietor and director of operations for Image Technology Consultants. They're based right outside of Dallas, Texas. And to get this interview, I actually went on site and I got to meet with Marshall in his 80,000 square foot warehouse. And what I thought was going to take about 60 to 90 minutes to do an interview ended up spending 4 to 5 hours on site. I actually missed my flight back to Florida. But Marshall was so hospitable, and during the interview, he would actually stop and go take calls to help support his technicians and engineers who were in the field working on medical imaging equipment, MRIs, that are in the customer facilities. So you got to commend somebody who stops an interview, takes a call to help one of his technicians. But that's the way that he and his company work. They're all there for the patient and for the staff and for the hospitals and imaging centers that have equipment that they rely on Marshall and his team to service. So Marshall's in a battle. This is a David and Goliath story. So over the next hour, you'll hear some amazing details about his fight against Philips. Philips is a conglomerate manufacturer over in the Netherlands. And what's interesting about this fight, I don't want to give too much away about the details, but there's a lot there, is the Netherlands and in Europe, they have rules. They have laws that are right to repair laws that they don't have in the United States. So we actually have a European country suing a great American company and a great veteran, an entrepreneur, a risk taker, a great service provider, a guy who teaches physics. We have a company that's trying to more or less reduce an option for our hospitals by suing and taking away, resources and his ability to do his job that he's done now for 30 plus years. So watch this compelling story and let us know what you think. What we don't know at this point about right to repair is, where do you as hospital executives or hospitals or imaging centers, where do you stand when it comes to right to repair? Do you want only the manufacturer or the OEMs to be able to fix your equipment? Or do you want to have all options available? If you know anything about our industry, I'm sure you can relate. It's very much a labor shortage, right? We have attrition that's highly impacting the available resources to provide service. It's not just us, it's everybody. But the OEMs, the manufacturers, have the ability to train as many people as they need to increase the level of quality, to make response times a lot less than what you're used to. But all you really kind of see is your price is going up. It costs like $1,000 an hour right now for you to get service when you call a manufacturer. So please consider where you're going to fall on the right to repair topic as you watch this hour-long interview. By the way, look for a bunch of clips. We're gonna take from this hour worth of information, and we're gonna pull clips like we do. We're gonna put them on TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn and other short, like YouTube Shorts. So look for that. If you can't watch the whole hour, please delegate to somebody in your radiology department who might have the time and can share with you their thoughts about right to repair and Marshall's story. Thank you, Marshall, for everything. We're with you in your fight. You're a new brother, a new friend, and from entrepreneur to entrepreneur, your resilience is something that motivates me. You don't stop, I won't stop. The people who you know in this industry, we're not gonna stop the fight. It would be nice to have everybody else's help, and I hope this story will help us get that. Thank you.
We work on MRIs and CTs. We primarily work on Philips and Siemens MRI.
Yeah.
So our company's broken into two parts. Image Technology is a parts portion.
Okay.
And Axiom is our service portion.
Okay.
So Axiom is the corporation that actually employs everybody. Okay. Image Technology runs a parts operation, and they're not a subsidiary, but they're basically a daughter LLC under the corporation.
Okay. Are you the CEO of all these entities?
We use director of operations.
Okay.
Since it's more of a technical corporation,
yeah,
we use director of operations. We don't have CEO titles.
Okay. How long have you been, how long has the company been open?
Image Technology changed names about in 2001. I changed names and got rid of some partners in 2003. So from 2003 on, it's been Image Technology. The IRS had a conflict with 941s when we added Axiom. They left payroll taxes on both companies. So again, we changed it to Image Technology Consulting 2 to fix the IRS blunder, since they thought we had two sets of employees with the exact same names and the exact same social security numbers.
Gotcha. Okay. That's crazy. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's sad that I had to fix it that way, but welcome to our government.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, all I can tell you is, if it comes to the IRS, walk kindly, pay the bill,
Okay.
whether it's due or whether it's not due, pay the bill, and then figure it out
And then
later.
figure it
Because
out.
if as a small guy, they'll shut your company accounts off. They'll put levies on everything that you own, and you can't function. So they made it incorrect for $70,000 bill one time. They made it incorrect $50,000 bill one time, and you figure out a way. You go borrow the money, you grin and bear it, you pay it.
Okay.
Because if you don't, the IRS and the state are the only ones that can charge you 63% interest. Anybody else that charges 38% interest, 38% penalties. So it ends up 63%. If you lent money to anybody in the United States with that, it's called usury. It's federal crime, and you go to jail.
Yeah, exactly.
But except the state of the federal government.
It's really good advice. I mean, it really is. Thank you. I hadn't thought about that.
So even if you get a loan at 10%, you're way better off than paying the extortion fees back to the government.
You're in MRI, and you also do CT, right? And
we only do CT when it's partnered with an MRI.
Okay.
Typically, we're an MRI sole house.
Okay.
But if you owned an imaging center or a hospital and you had MRI and CT, and you want us to cover the CT because we were covering your MRI, we would. But typically, we're not going to go out and try to source just CT.
So since I've been here, you've been on technical calls. A big part of your job still feels like you're in the fixing the equipment part too.
I'm a working boss.
Okay.
My ideas about operation and director operations is it's easier to train people if you're at the top of your game. So the only way that you can stay at the top of your game is to stay doing the work.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but and plus, I like this work. Never did the same thing twice, and people rely on me to figure things out.
Yeah.
And when it comes to troubleshooting things, I can handle my own every once in a while.
I'm sure. Yeah. So the techs look up to somebody that knows how to.
Well, my engineers, we have somebody in the company that does lead tech support, and then of course I listen in.
Yeah.
And what I give my employees is the ability to save time on site. Instead of them having to go through the same thing I went through 15 or 20 years ago, figuring out what's wrong, if they give me some back feedback, I can usually tell them what part they're needing and which direction to go to eliminate 2 or 3 days of troubleshooting.
Nice.
So it's a huge offset. And Roger works for us as a lead tech support guy. Okay. And it's the same thing. The tech support guys back home on the field that have 15 to 20 years experience can save the guys physically on the site hours and hours, sometimes days of time in troubleshooting.
I bet. That's great. Do they prefer to be called engineer or technician?
As far as on the repair side, everybody's pretty much an engineer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, field service engineers is what the technical term for us is. The technicians are usually the guys running the machines, as far as behind the desk doing the scans.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I never wanted to offend anybody. I didn't know the terminology and if it meant something to like if I called somebody who's an engineer or technician, if I were them, I'd be offended. I just kind of my own thing, but I didn't know if that runs.
I don't.
Yeah.
You may offend somebody, but you're not going to offend me.
Okay.
It might be simple.
Very good. So I was in, and this is my impression of you so far. I've only seen you through like social media, and I've talked to some people who've known you. But there's this statue I saw. I was in Italy, like in July this year, and I went to Florence, and I saw this statue of David, and it's Michelangelo, and it's the David and Goliath thing, right?
Right.
And I've seen you in the mix with some OEMs very recently, and it's probably been longer than this, but I've just really kind of woken up and started paying attention to that. As a matter of fact, you had a GoFundMe page. I gave money to it because what I saw in you was knowledgeable, experienced, a good person, and then had just enough, I don't know what to call it, moxie to go do something about what's happening in our industry, right? And I'm just curious from your perspective, do you feel like that when you're doing this? Do you feel like a David fighting Goliath, or do you feel like you got to make sure you protect your backyard?
I don't think it's about the backyard.
Okay.
I'm going to step you back a little bit. When I first got in this business, it's always been about patient care.
Okay.
I'm ex-military. I've installed machines throughout the world. I've put original machines in third-party countries. So I think we probably put one of the first machines in India. We probably put one of the first machines in Costa Rica. We probably put one of the first machines in Argentina, places where they didn't have MRIs, places where the OEMs aren't. So we had to rely on ourselves to put these things in. But on the same side of the coin, we're providing not to the U.S. stage, but to the stage of public people. I mean, Mexico, Argentina, and some of these places didn't have any MRIs. I mean, literally, when I first got to Costa Rica, I met this lady. She was in a Halo. She got in a car accident. She was in this Halo. And they said she was going to have to be in this Halo for 6 weeks because it was take her 6 weeks to get a CT. And this was prior to us bringing an MRI into the country. So it's been about patient care and patient care and patient care and patient care. And the OEMs who claim that patient care is real important to them, you would think that they would want, A, third parties to check up on what they're doing, and B, to fix the machines under no cost, right? If the OEM doesn't have a repair center or service presence in these certain countries, why would they care or try to prevent me from servicing a machine in a country? It's only going to help them. If their OEM name brand is good there, then they're going to buy another machine there. If the OEM throws their hands up and says, we're not going to do this, or not going to do this, or not going to do this, and if you do this, we're going to try to sue you, the customer isn't, I'm not sure. Philips thinks that the customers are going to go back to them, but the honest effect is, why would you buy an MRI and then the OEM fights you during the time that you own the MRI, and then you're going to go buy that MRI again? It would be the same thing if you bought a Ford, and then Ford says, well, we're not going to sell you parts. You can't buy parts from anybody else. You have to get it repaired with us. The odds of you buying a Ford again are pretty slim to none. And that's kind of the dance that the OEMs are doing. It's just not Philips. Every one of them, hook, line, and sinker, from about 2018, decided that they did not have to follow federal regulations anymore. Prior to 2018, they weren't 100% in compliant. However, most of them were in compliant. You know, all of them claim that we don't have to do this. Well, if they don't have to do this, why have they done it since 1988? And then all of a sudden, in 2018, 2019, their decision has changed. So I'm not sure why the decision changed. However, for me, you ask about my gut. My gut is, it's always been about patient care. It's about fixing the machine without getting anybody involved, without having to rely on the OEM, without having to rely on anybody except me. Because when you're in Costa Rica or Puerto Rico or Jamaica or Argentina, there's no tech support. You know, you have to be able to fix the machine alone. And that's kind of where Image Technology and Marshall strive. We troubleshoot in a way unlike the OEM. We don't have their bad habits.
No, that's well put. And so when I'm out there and talking to hospital administrators, right, I think it's interesting the way you kind of bring up how hospitals will leverage their position, right? I've seen that behavior where they complain and they've had bad experiences from the OEM, and they're getting charged, what, $1,000 an hour for service when they don't get a contract. I mean, you hear it all. But then I'm baffled when they do buy again, you know? And so one of the things that we've been trying to do is to help them with information and help them feel confident. And you don't have to stick with that technology if you're going to get bad service. And options, right? I feel like options will help them make that better decision.
Hospitals face a few things. Typically, a hospital is going to have more than one MRI. And hospitals often change OEMs, but when they change OEM, you have to remember they have to retrain their staff. The operating system on a Siemens is different than the operating system on a Philips. So it's just not a matter of changing equipment. All their infrastructure has to change, because let's say that they have 3 techs and 3 PRN techs and 3 temp techs. That's 9 people that have to be retrained on a new interface, a new machine, new protocols, new applications people. So that involves 3 or 4 weeks each of them getting trained. Now, if you buy a new piece of equipment from Philips, Philips will train 2 people as part of the purchase for free. Anybody else, the hospital's going to have to pay for. And so what Philips did in 2018 is they allowed what they called biomed contracts, where a hospital could buy a new piece of equipment, and under that contract, they were going to train 2 or 3 of the biomed people at the hospital to do first calls and PMs, right? You've heard of this. It's like it's a contract that they buy to reduce the hospital's costs. So when these changes occurred in 2018, 2019, not only did they lock third party out, but they locked out these biomed agreements that they had previously made. So there's a lot of contracts in place where Philips agreed to train these people, and Philips agreed to give them access. And not only did they reduce my access and not follow the federal code, but they took these contract customers that they had contracted to train and contracted to allow to do this service, and then they took them off and forced them to hire Philips back for service, because once Philips implemented some of these changes, there was no way around it. You had to hire Philips to do the work, even if you hated Philips.
Right.
And you're stuck with the machine, and now you're stuck with them, even though in a lot of cases, the hospital fired them 2 years earlier and went with somebody third party. They'd have to bring them back in, or the third party would have to bring them back in.
I got you.
And so that was the original play. The original play was, if I had a contract, let's say with a customer in Oklahoma. Philips changed these rules, went to the customer's site, changed the software without my authorization, told the customer that it was a safety update. It wasn't a safety update. It was to lock third party and biomeds out. That was the purpose, and to load some malware. But when they did this, they didn't inform the customer, oh, by the way, nobody's gonna be able to access any service component of your machine anymore. They did it. They did it and drove away.
Oh my gosh.
So the next time the machine broke, the service engineer showed up, couldn't get in the software.
Right.
And now they're stuck between a rock and a hard place,
Right.
and they have to call Philips for service because there's no one else that has access to the machine at that point.
Doesn't seem.
Whether it was a contract customer or not a contract. So that's the big thing. The big thing is contract customers consent to this.
Okay.
Contract customers don't offer any consent. So in the medical field, there's a couple implications when the OEM does this. We've got HIPAA protection. We've got to protect patient privacy. If there's no agreement between Philips and the customer, let's say that Philips had a contract and they fired him.
Mm-hmm.
They have no contract.
Yeah.
And then Philips came in and loaded this new software.
Yeah.
They have access to patient data, and they weren't authorized to have patient access. They didn't tell the customer that they had access to their system. They didn't tell the customer that they were going to be spying on the customer, and they didn't tell the customer that their system was going to send indiscriminate messages back to Philips about their site.
Wow. And so your opinion is that the hospital didn't know that this was happening.
The hospital was not informed. In fact, the newsletter that you can refer to in the story, the newsletter that I refer to, Service Pack 5 newsletter, it explicitly says in the newsletter, don't tell the customers what we're doing.
Oh my gosh. So where are the customers in all this? Are they outraged? Or are they still kind of not paying attention? What do you think is going on with them?
My customers are a mix, right? So we've got independent imaging centers that allow me to take the Service Pack off. We have independent imaging centers that I contacted before Philips started doing this, that we didn't allow Philips in to do the work. And then, of course, Image Technology owns 40 or 50 systems. And, of course, I didn't let them modify my systems.
Right.
Now, the big hospitals, since Philips claimed it was a safety issue, the big hospitals took it, and they continued to pay Philips begrudgingly. Yeah. They paid Philips. So for a short period of time, 2 or 3 years, we would go in and change hardware components at the hospital. Mm-hmm. And after we changed the hardware component, since Philips took away our ability to calibrate the hardware component or install the hardware component, then I can install the hardware component and save the customer $50,000 on the part.
Right.
And then the customer would end up having to turn around and hire Philips to come calibrate it.
Wow.
So it started off, when this first started, Philips would charge them a couple hours to come and calibrate, 15-minute calibration. They would charge them a couple hours. And then maybe 6 months later, it was a 6-hour minimum. And then maybe 6 months later, now it's a 10-hour minimum. And then 6 months later, flash forward, Philips won't allow us to install the part. The only way that they'll calibrate is that they install the part. So it's convoluted. If you go back 5 years ago, the CEO of Philips said in a shareholder meeting that third party was ruining their parts business, and that they needed to get rid of third parties in their parts business. In a nutshell, I think the direct quote was, third party suppliers are cannibalizing our systems and ruining our parts business, quote. And that is your timeline. So if you flash forward, that was almost exactly to the date of when they implemented these software changes, which limited the ability to calibrate gradients, one of their highest selling items. And if you look at the timeline, it almost orchestrates and demonstrates that timeline is being followed to their goal that was set out in their stockholder meeting 5 years ago, trying to put third-party parts guys out of business. Now, they're suing us for service and indirect access and partial access and these terms. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if you really follow the money, because the money always tells you the story, right. You follow the money, they want to get rid of the parts guys who are in competition with them. If they have no parts competition, then they, quote, get their parts business back. And I'll just give you an example. The reason they want their parts business back. Right now, current status of gradients, let's say a 281 gradient amplifier on a Philips machine, 271 or 781 system, the rack is going to cost maybe $250,000 brand new. The rack has 3 axes in it. Each axis sells for about $90,000 from Philips. Now, in my world, Philips charges $96,000 for one axis. We charge about $42,000 for the same axis. So it's actually less than half. We charge about 40% of Philips's list price. And Philips is asking me, well, how do you base your price? I said, well, I call you and get a price, and I base my price on your price. And they said, well, that's not fair. I'm like, for us or for you?
Great question.
So is it fair for the customer, or is it us or you? But the reason the customers don't remain with Philips is because it would be very similar for you buying a car. Yeah. You can go buy a tire, a discount tire, the same tire, actually, $210. Let's say you're going to get $210 for a nice Pirelli tire. Okay, so if you go to the Maserati dealer, that same exact tire is going to cost you $600 because you're at the Maserati dealer.
Right.
Same tire, same rubber, same manufacturer.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing. A computer on a Philips system, it's a Dell computer, a 420 computer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The 420 computer, you can buy it from Dell for maybe $1,400.
Yeah.
But if you buy that computer from Philips, it's going to cost you $14,000. Same exact computer.
Yeah. Great analogy.
So it just depends on what parts you're talking about. And Philips claims proprietary this and proprietary that. The truth is those parts are proprietary, and we get them proprietary repaired. We use the same repair channels that they use. We use the same components that they use. In fact, we probably buy 40 to 60 part systems per year.
Wow. So
we're actually selling their parts. So how can they? This is the funniest part. The funniest part of the whole story is we don't have quality control of our parts, according to Philips.
Yeah.
Yet one of our biggest parts purchasing departments is Philips. Philips end of life their MRI scanners typically between 6 and 8 years.
Yeah.
They end of service typically between 8 and 10 years.
Yeah.
So all the systems that are in the litigation, every system that they're suing anybody for, they've already end of lifed and they've end of serviced.
Yeah.
So prior to end of life and end of service, they lock the software, and now they won't allow anybody in there. Now we'll give you the exact opposite. So Siemens Medical. So let's say I'm working on a Siemens Symphony, something that's end of life and end of service. What they do is you'll call them for a license, which is a key to actually access certain parts of the service. Mm-hmm. And Siemens says, this is end of life and end of service. We're going to issue this key to you, and it's a perpetual key. It's going to last forever because we don't offer service for this machine. We don't sell parts for the machine, and we won't offer you any tech support because those machines are no longer on our repertoire.
Makes sense.
Okay. Philips did exactly the opposite. They came in and locked the software up, then they end of life and end of serviced it. And they said, we're not going to help you, and you can't work on your own. And if you work on your own, we're going to sue you.
Whoa.
So the goal is they want you to throw the machine away, and they think that you're going to buy another Philips machine.
Yep. For the money.
Now, if I was extorted by Ford, I wouldn't buy another Ford.
That's right.
That's the best analogy I can tell you. And Philips is painting the picture like they think they're going to gain market share by this action, and they claim safety. They didn't even claim safety. They claimed renewable resources. They claim that them recycling their systems and them recovering their systems and selling used parts is somehow better for the environment than me doing it.
Wow.
So if you look at the entire shareholder meeting, the analogy was that. The analogy was all about renewals and saying how they were going to recycle and renew, and the fact that they had their hand on the button was better than anybody else had the hand on the button.
I'm curious, what do you guys charge per hour for labor versus what the manufacturer might? Because you said 10 hours minimum, 2 hours minimum. What's the delta between your charge and your company for labor versus what Philips might charge?
Across the board, I'd say it's probably about the same as I told you earlier for parts. It's about 40% of their price.
Wow.
Of course, they mandate certain drive times. Their drive times are built at the same as normal time.
Wow.
Our drive time is built at half of normal time.
Yeah.
And our normal time is, like I said, it's probably less than 40% of their normal time now.
Wow.
I think Philips right now is charging $6.95 an hour with a 6-hour minimum. It's 4-hour minimum, but they have a minimum of 2 hours travel, assuming that you're in a major city. If you're not in a major city, they may charge you 6 hours of travel. They may charge you a minimum of 10 hours.
That's crazy. Do you guys have minimums here for your business?
Local, no.
Okay.
If we have to drive somewhere, of course, what we typically do is whatever the drive time is what we charge for the minimum hours.
Sure.
So if it costs us 2 hours to get there and 2 hours back, then we'll charge 4 minimum while we're on site.
Okay.
But in Philips's case, I don't think you can get them to show up for less than $4,000 now.
Wow.
So that's assuming they just show up, and whether they're there 5 minutes or 4 hours, they still charge you for the 4 hours.
So I assume, it's just a layman's assumption, right? I know the business a little bit, but I would assume that if they're going to charge that much, that you're going to get quicker response time. You're going to get better personalities. So you're going to get everything that's better, right? But the quicker response time comes to mind. Like if I'm going to pay that much for an emergency, how long is it going to take them to get there? They're going to be there within like 4 hours?
That's nearly hilarious. And it's hilarious for a couple of reasons, because all of our businesses act the same. So we all prioritize contract customers.
Yeah.
We'll start off with that. All of us. Philips as well as us. We prioritize our contract customers. Our contract customers are paying us a monthly fee to drop and roll.
Yeah.
And those customers get priority service.
Okay.
Now, 4 hours, I don't know if anybody's going to get 4 hour service regardless, unless if they're in a major city, maybe. Our customers will. And the difference, I'll tell you how our company is a little different than the OEM. But for the most part, you call, dispatch, let's say Philips, 4 to 6 hours. They'll usually be on site if they've got a contract with you. If you don't have a contract, I'm just going to have to say you're on a waiting list.
Okay.
And you're on a waiting list that you don't know what the result is going to be. It's not like you're on a waiting list. We'll be there tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
Sure.
We'll be there when we can, and we'll call you a couple hours before we can get there. It may be today, it may be tomorrow, it may be the next day.
Yeah.
And depending on the region, they may give you a better explanation than that. But for the most part, that's the explanation that you get. In our case, remember that we're in Dallas. We're in an 80,000 square foot building. We've got parts for pretty much every Philips MRI that's ever been made, and it's here.
Yeah.
And we've got a troubleshooting system set up to where I can get on the phone with an engineer on site, pretty much diagnose the problem 80% of the time. So by the time I'm driving to the site, the part is with me. Yeah. So when we show up, we diagnose, change the part, leave, and it's a one-day repair cost, right?
Yeah.
In your world, we charge you for the part. Yeah. We charge you for our hourly minimum and our drive time. Yeah. We only showed up one time and you're done.
Yeah.
The normal way the OEM works is you call them, you get priority service. They're going to show up. They'll be on the site for an hour. They'll charge you for 4. Yeah. They're going to diagnose the problem. They're going to order the part. The part will be there the next day, maybe the next day, depending on the part.
Yeah.
And then they're going to charge you again for the second day.
Yeah.
So by the time you're done, Dave's best analogy, he says the way that image technology works is to calculate total cost. Total cost being the complete cost of apparel, right? If you have a repair, what did that repair cost you from total? From day that you were down until the day you got back up.
Yeah.
So in our world, not only did they save the day, but they were down a day less. So they got to scan more patients.
Right.
Where if you take the OEM analogy, and this is just not Philips, this is typically how the OEMs work.
In general.
Generally speaking, they're not going to have local parts.
Yeah.
They have a parts distribution. Philips is out of Tennessee. Okay. So Philips is going to dispatch 90% of the parts from Tennessee. So it's not going to be a same day repair unless they can get next flight out. Yeah. Which basically means if you get them on site prior to 4 o'clock p.m., you might have a next flight out that will get there by the next morning. Where in our case, we'll pick up the part, we'll put it in our truck. We've got air ride trucks because this is what we do. Yeah. We drive the part to the site, we install the part. By that evening, when Philips is ordering a part, compared to Image is leaving the site and it's repaired.
Right.
And so even though that we're less expensive, the reason that we still have customers 20 years later is because we fix them faster. Yeah. And the faster we fix them, the more they can get back to scanning. Yeah. The more they get back to scan, the more they can afford us to fix them.
Right.
And so we have to remember, if the customer's down, the customer can't afford to pay me.
Yep.
And I want all their money, just not all at one time.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Philips is a little different. They want all their money and they want it all today.
Well, I think that's kind of where, on the flip side of that too, they're now pushing litigation to try to keep this option away from the hospital administrators. And at the very least, they're putting out probably some misinformation, if I had to guess, about what is happening. And I think about fear tactics. I think fear mongering comes to mind when I talk to administrators. They think that something could happen negatively if they don't use the OEM, right? And over the years, I've just seen that get worse and more bought into. So I see them protecting their profits, using whatever methods they can to keep third parties out. And I think misinformation. So this is a good way for us to kind of get the message out. Like, look, do some research, give it a try, but don't just take somebody's word for it because, they're the OEM.
I don't like the word misinformation because it's been overused since COVID.
Okay.
However, I hear what you're saying, but the hospitals are in a unique situation because hospital administrators don't necessarily react to patient safety and patient care as much as they do as general safety, cybersecurity, and HIPAA compliance safety, and all these jargon terms that the OEM throws out here and says, well, your system's not going to be safe. You could get cyber alerts and you could get cyber attacks and you get ransomware. What they don't tell them is they loaded that very same material into their software updates. So they're exposed to it by the manufacturer who says our job is to protect you.
Right.
So yes, they're being misguided at best, and the hospital administrators, especially at the smaller rural hospitals, can't afford the OEM.
Right.
And the OEM takes them down these pathways. And again, the rural hospital is 4 hours away and 6 hours away and 10 hours away. So unlike Dallas, let's say that you're working at UT Southwest, you've got a 4-hour service call and 2 hours worth of drive, right?
Yep.
And that's typically a smaller bill than a rural hospital let's say in Norman, Oklahoma,
Right.
where you're going to take 4 hours travel to get there, 4 hours travel to get back.
Yep.
So the rural hospital ends up having to pay 8 hours,
Yeah.
and we'll put 8 hours in the analogy, $8,000 more than the hospital that's in a regionally big city.
Yeah.
So it costs them more, they have to pay more, and their downtime means more to them because there is no backup MRI in Norman, Oklahoma. There's one.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of downsides to rural hospitals. The big hospitals, they typically broker with the OEMs for free equipment and free service and some bonuses that rural hospitals and normal imaging centers and especially third world countries don't have an opportunity
That's
to.
right. That's
So,
right.
I mean, a big hospital can leverage a lot of things with Philips and Siemens. It's not about just MRI. It's not about just CT. If you've got 20 X-ray suites and 20 fluoro suites, the MRI and CT to Philips or Siemens doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be a cost saver. It could be a cost generator. It just depends on how their structure is. Because if you've got 50 pieces of equipment in the hospital, you can give them a $500,000 discount on the MRI visually, while you're marking up the other items 5%, and your delta net profit is the same. And so there's masking agents, and we buy a lot of used equipment from the OEMs. So Philips says I'm a bad guy, but yet they sell me their old systems. Siemens sells me old systems. GE sells me old systems. So the very people, if they didn't want me to buy their old systems, they should buy them back up. That's the one way to reduce me from the market. Outbid me and don't let me buy the old machines. But I buy old machines from them. I buy service components from them. I buy service tools from them. They buy parts from me. They use me for service components. They again, when they end of life a product, they no longer support those parts. They throw the parts in the trash. They physically don't have the parts.
Don't make them available, right?
Yeah, Philips not only disposes of all their parts end of life, they still support some of the sites. So Philips does the same thing we do with CT. So if they bought a brand new Ingenia and they still have two Achievas, they'll cover the two Achievas because they've got that Ingenia, even though the Achiva's end of life, right? Or they'll turn it over to their multi-vendor section. So Philips has an OEM section. They've got the multi-vendor section. And so they'll turn it over to their multi-vendor section who may still want to work on it, but they don't have the parts anymore. So this is a unique thing. So when a system becomes 6 or 7 or sometimes 8 years old, instead of me buying parts from Philips, which I do on newer systems, then Philips starts buying parts from me on the older systems because I stock the system parts that they no longer have. They stock the newer equipment that I can't get except from them. And so it's been a back scratching opportunity for both of us for years and years and years. And it's very mutual for both of us. So I don't understand exactly what's happened in 2018, 2019, because it seems to me that if the corporate guys talk to the people that are actually doing the work, they'll understand that I'm not a bad guy. I do engineering help with them. I do deinstall help with them. I'm the guy who, they contact and they said, well, our engineer says this won't fit out the wall. It's not going to fit out the opening. You're not going to be able to rig this. And I'm the guy who says, hold my beer. I'll get it out for you. So
that's great. And that's the thing that when I look at what's happening here, you're not picking a fight. You're not. You're just trying to, do what's right for the industry, for the patients, And so if this went away tomorrow and you guys could get along, you'd be all for it. If I don't want to put words in your mouth. But
no, and that's correct. But if you go back to my history, I'm going to say probably 2012, 2013, I wanted Philips to do a little more on the compliance. They offered the installation guide. They offered some guides. But if you pick up a Philips installation guide, according to 21 CFR 820-170, it basically says an installable device. The OEM's obligated to give the installation instructions. So what Philips does is they give you an installation instruction book. And on the front of the book, it says, this is our obligation to the FDA compliance, right? So in their own words, they said that this book allows them to be in compliance. So then as you read through the book, there's portions of the book that now require a password, or there's a portion of the book that they've locked you out of, or there's a portion of the book that you can't do without their approval or a software key or an unlock key or a special tool.
You can't do, or nobody ever can do.
Only
Philips?
Only Philips.
Wow. So the customers can do it.
The customers, okay, there's an IFU. An IFU is an instruction for use. That's a book for the customer. Everything in that book, Philips is supposed to obligate, and they don't. And then there's actually installation document. The installation document is what's required by the FDA. But in the installation document, you're basically, the FDA says that they have to provide instructions to a layperson, right? I've got 20 years experience. I'm not a layperson. So the book is supposed to be able to allow you to install an MRI. And if you need special tools or special instruction or special anything, they're supposed to obligate and give it to you.
Why do you think that is? Why did the FDA do that, do you think?
It was demonstrated best during COVID.
Okay.
And COVID was a great example because Philips couldn't repair the systems. Right. Nobody could get to the systems. If you weren't local, you couldn't get to the system to repair it. So who suffered? Not the hospital, not the imaging center. The patient suffered.
Right.
And again, this goes back to what I said. Patients shouldn't suffer. We've got technological advances in the United States. We've got MRIs in the United States. There's absolutely no reason a patient should suffer for OEM profit.
That's right.
And that's as simple as it gets.
Well,
and that's the reason. I think that's the reason the FDA did what they did.
Yeah.
They wanted anybody, the owner, the hospital, biomed, to be able to fix the equipment without the OEM getting in conflict. Now, just to step you out a little bit, if the VA, a National Institute of Health, National Institute of Aging, buy a system from Philips, they don't get locked out of anything. They get complete access. In fact, they get complete access and they get all these books that Philips says are illegal. They get copies of them. In fact, part of my lawsuit, we buy systems from Fort Stewart Army Hospital.
Sure.
We buy systems from National Institute of Health. The software is completely unlocked.
Wow.
The keys that they say are illegal, it's completely open on that system.
So it's not protected.
It arrived like that. So obviously Philips has a way to unlock it for the federal government, because they know that the federal government requires them to follow regulations.
Right.
But outside of the federal government offices, they kind of drop their pants, and they say, okay, well, that's for them and not for you. Well, the FDA, the VA and the government institutions will not buy it unless they follow the procedures. The procedures are, here you go. I was ex-military, right?
Yeah.
And this was done for a reason. Yeah. If we're in a battlefield and we're at war, Philips ain't coming to repair the system.
That's right.
So the idea, the whole function and the reasons for these rules is so we can repair the system in the field without any help from the OEM. We have the documentation to repair the system in the field without any documentation from the OEM.
Yep.
Because the OEM's not coming to war with us.
Yep.
And so that's the reason the Army, Department of Defense, and the VA have one set of rules. Yeah. And then those rules are followed by Philips strictly. Yep. Because if they don't follow the rules, they don't get paid.
Right.
Where in the normal population, there's a little more political pressure for the OEM to strong arm.
Yep.
And they don't have people like me who say, listen, you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
And I've told them they're doing wrong for 10 to 15 years.
Yep.
They've never once said, you're doing wrong. They never once said, you're breaking the law. They never once asked me to stop doing what I'm doing.
Right.
This is how we find out. We find out in litigation. They all of a sudden say, oh, you're the bad guy. I'm like, okay, well, I wasn't the bad guy for the first 15 years.
That's crazy. It's crazy.
It's a very unique story.
Yeah. No, it is. And that's why I think people are going to be interested. And I think if we can distill it down to, bite sizes, and you've done that. I've seen some of what you've written, and it's coming out. And I think that our goal is to get attention, and people to understand it. But also, I'm interested in hearing, how is this going to help hospitals, moving forward? Like, how is this fight here going to be a roadmap that could help others, in the future? And, why are you the guy? Why are you the guy to fight this fight? That's what I keep thinking in my head. It's like, why does Marshall have to do this?
I don't know if I'm necessarily the guy who's going to fight the fight.
Okay.
I'm just not. I'm the guy who's not going to take false excuses on the reason why they're doing what they're doing.
Okay.
They're providing a whole list of excuses, and it has nothing to do with patient care, has nothing to do with function of the machine, has nothing to do with safety. They're saying, well, we can't do certain service aspects because they were found unsafe. Well, if you do a comparison analysis, in fact, I think there's a couple of stories that refer to safety, and the OEM has as many safety defects as third party. The only difference is the OEM can cover up their safety defects a lot easier than a third party can.
Sure.
And so at the end of the day, service providers typically get better service from a third party guy. And I can tell you why. We all have employers and employees. A third party guy is going to get paid per job, not necessarily per hour, and they don't have a boss. They have a boss, but they have a boss to get the job finished. Yeah. When you're working with an OEM, you've got an install crew, a repair guy, you've got the actual service engineers, you've got the parts for providers, and there's no benefit for these guys to work conjoined.
Yep.
There's no benefit for them to reduce costs. There's no benefit to reduce shipping. There's no benefit to reduce downtime for the customer.
Yep.
In fact, 99% of all service contracts or warranties from the OEM, the hospital says, we don't want you to do a PM during normal hours. So even though they've got a full service contract, even though they get free service if they are within a 5 to 8 period time frame, the hospital is going to say, I want you to work after hours, and after hours, charge $695 an hour.
Yep.
So Here's a hospital. They just paid $2.9 million for a brand new machine. They've got warranty coverage and PM coverage as long as it's 8 to 5.
Yeah.
And hospitals don't want to be down 8 to 5.
No.
And the OEMs won't make any concessions to work on it any different time. And that's why our business is changing. Medicare reimbursements are going down. All of our health care is going, you get reimbursed more if you have health insurance for your dog and you go get an MRI on your dog.
Yeah.
The vendor from the MRI giving you an MRI for your dog gets reimbursed almost twice as much as if it was a human. It's sickening to think, especially aging America, Medicare, Medicaid used to pay $700 for an MRI. Then it was $300 for an MRI. Yeah. And the new administration, we're under $200 for an MRI. And so the quality of care is going down, regulations are going up, and then of course the OEMs tightening their belt, but they're tightening their belt by ignoring federal regulation. If they don't like federal regulation, they should change it. And part of this thing, I'm pretty sure that you read that there's an exemption. So DMCLA exemptions existed during the Farm Bill, the Agriculture Bill. If you remember, John Deere and the federal government implemented a debt recovery system on their tractors.
Okay.
And since the federal government issued this diesel exhaust fluid cleaning agent onto their tractors, they implemented passwords onto their tractors. So now the farmers had no access to repair their tractors anymore. Right. Because they said, if we provide you access, you can bypass this DEF system. Well, they went to court, I want to say early 2022, and the Library of Congress issued exemptions to the rule. The exemptions went to agriculture, and the exemptions went to medical devices. And partly because it was during COVID. So at the beginning of 2022, the Library of Congress said that we are allowed to circumvent Philips' software as long as without extraordinary terms to repair, diagnose, or install the equipment.
Wow.
So they basically gave us permission to backdoor the software to get it installed or to service it. Now, Philips doesn't like that. Siemens doesn't like that. So all the OEMs, pretty much, there's a medical alliance, which basically is GE and Siemens and Philips. And then last year, Philips exited the medical alliance, and now they sue separately. So both of them appealed this action. Okay. And it went back to the Library of Congress at the end of 2022, and they all lost the appeal. So it stayed in effect. And it's supposed to be renewed every 3 years. And the year 3 renewal is coming back up. And of course, now Philips has exited Medical Alliance, and Medical Alliance is still Siemens and GE. And they're all suing the Library of Congress again to try to get that rule retracted.
Right.
Because they want to control the market.
Yep.
And it doesn't even matter if they control the market, because regardless of being able to circumvent the software, 21 CFR 820 says they already should have been providing installation documents. Yep. So they've already been ignoring the law. Now, in defense, prior to 2018, most of the OEMs provided not necessarily 100% of the documentation they were supposed to, but limited documentation.
Sure.
Where in 2018 and 2019 says, we don't have to give you anything, sorry. And it was originally thought that, it was only for the OEMs. The OEM was the only person that had to have it. And since the OEM had to install it, then it was fine. Yeah. So we got it clarified with the FDA. And in fact, you'll see, there, if you follow my LinkedIn page, you'll see I actually printed the page from the FDA because we asked them for clarification. Does installation mean just the OEM? Does it mean third party or owners or hospitals or what? And they clarified it very clearly and said it's not only the OEM, but it's third parties, it's hospitals or its owners if they have the ability to install equipment. Wow. So they clarified it, and even though they clarified it, didn't clear up any conflicts, which should have cleared up conflicts. But we're gonna still play this game and fight.
So your passion is really, I mean, you come across as really genuine, Marshall. But I think people are going to be curious about you personally. Like, what is it that where does this passion come from? What drives you to do this, and how is this affecting you? Like, what does it do to have to deal with this every day?
Well, partly I'm in this business because I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm in this business because I grew up as a paramedic in the Army, patient care. But honestly, I've always been a 100-hour-a-week guy. I've always been the guy who employed others. I'm always the guy who figures out how things work. I'm always the guy that figures out how to make things function and how to control a group and how to manage a group and how to push forward to a greater goal. So honestly, I just have the ability to organize people, and I can forward think. I typically don't think about today or tomorrow. I'm thinking weeks or months in advance, which in our population today, a lot of people have the ability to do. They're kind of now people, and people aren't future people. Yeah. And that's true with the OEM.
Sure.
So the fight is the fight. I didn't bring the fight, but I'm not going to step down. This fight has nothing to do with the OEM. This is really a principle fight. Yeah. Philips didn't sue Image Technology for breaking rules. Philips sued Image Technology for breaking rules, and they sued Marshall Shannon for fraud.
Wow.
Marshall Shannon is not a fraud, and that was their fight. We could have settled. We could have done a lot of things, but there's a problem when they accuse me personally of fraud. Yeah. There's not a fraud bone in my body. There's nothing they're going to find in my history that commits fraud. Yeah. Ethically, they're wrong. Yeah. Ethically, they're putting a finger on somebody's back that's ethically very strong and morally very strong. Yeah. And when somebody pushes somebody around like that, I can tell you right now, nobody's going to tell me I'm a fraud to my face and expect me not to fight. Yeah. And their goal is to outspin me. Yeah. Their goal is to outspin anybody. The idea of litigation with Philips is sue, settle, and seal. Yeah. So they sue somebody, they settle it, and they seal it up so anybody else they're in litigation with can't read it, can't see it, can't see when it went on. So they can play that game, but I'm the only guy who they've sued who are using the federal statutes and the federal code against them, which is a very distinct difference. Everything that I did, 21 CFR says I'm allowed to do. So if I'm ruled against in court, basically the court is saying that it is illegal for me to follow federal code. Yeah. Because in this world that we're living in, by definition of the FDA, Philips is a manufacturer for MRI. But since I reinstall it and since I remanufacture parts, I'm also a manufacturer for an MRI. So if the court agrees or disagrees, and I think the court's going to be fair. I've got a fair judge. I think she's going to be open-minded and fair. But the truth is, Philips is not following federal regulation. I have to follow federal regulation. So if I sell you a system, I'm supposed to supply you with the very books that Philips won't supply me. Right. So by me following federal regulation and giving you the book, Philips is saying I'm breaking their rules and they're going to sue me. Yeah. So it's a very, very weird situation since I have to be following federal regulations. And the very people that are supposed to be also follow them aren't. And I'm stuck in the middle between the federal government and Philips saying, well, what you're doing is illegal. But it's right there. It's been in the federal code book since 1988. Right. Now, I mean, they've changed the verbiage, but it's always been there.
It's always been there. Right. Yeah. Is there anything that, has been like a big lesson for you that you didn't expect to come out of this over the past, couple of years?
COVID shined some lights. Okay. COVID did a lot of things, not only with our government, but with our healthcare system, with private individuals. I mean, people put some masks on for COVID. People put some masks on for COVID. You got to see who people were. You got to see where their backbone was. You got to see about what they cared about, what they didn't care about, and what roads they would path for patient care. I remember during COVID, everybody was shut off. Texas was shut off from Louisiana. We couldn't get anywhere. The planes were shut down. Our business is to repair hospital equipment. We can't get to the hospitals. The hospitals won't let us in the hospitals. We can't travel across state lines. So as soon as the federal regulations changed and allowed what they called, essential workers, and we fall into the essential worker category. We actually bought a fifth wheel RV. We bought a truck, and we drove to finish our installations and drove to our service sites across state borders with our little get out of jail free card, and stayed in state parks who tried to tell us we had to, what was it called at the time? Quarantine. Oh. So we'd go to a state park. They say we had to quarantine, and we'd show them our little federal paperwork, and we would basically stay in one town for 2 days, drive to our next site for 2 days, drive to our next site for 2 days. And literally we were on the road for 3 weeks at a time during COVID, doing RPMs and doing repairs because there was no other way to get there. And again, there's a lot of places, including the OEM, that did not do that. Yeah. That's because their gut and their role and their primary core goal is not patient safety. Right. Their primary core goal is something else. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but if it was patient safety, they'd have found a way to have the service engineers making sure the machines were repaired. They would find a way to make sure that those machines were working, because that was one time when it was most crucial for those machines to be working. CTs and MRIs were diagnosing patients and actually controlling life and death situations, which they do anyway. But during COVID, it was much more important to find out if lungs were contaminated and how to treat the patient. If it was truly COVID, it was truly lung oriented, it was truly pneumonia. Yeah. Philips just doesn't have, I say Philips, it's all the OEMs. Right. They just don't have a big presence in some countries. And those very countries are where they're trying to limit their presence. Even if third-party vendors are bringing the machines there, it's almost like they don't want the advertising. They don't want the publicity of having the machine there.
Sure. Sure.
Very unruly a lot of times, because the
Yeah.
fight I'm fighting is not really a fight for Philips or Siemens or anybody else. It's a fight for the hospitals or the countries to have proper medical equipment.
Yeah.
I mean,
Completely appreciate that.
in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And the thing when you talk to you, I mean, I'm behind the scenes and I've kind of gotten to know you a little bit remotely, but it's not about the money. It's not. You even mentioned that once. I mean, I'm in your shop here, and it's wonderful, by the way. I love this place, but it's not about the business. You're doing it for the right reasons. I can feel it. You can just feel, and I think that comes across when you're talking to the camera, and people are going to get that. So I mean, it's nice. I mean, but when you go to the OEMs, who's the face? Who's that person, right? I don't think we really know.
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience, I couldn't tell you who to go talk to at the OEM to have these discussions, right? It'd be. I don't think it exists, first of all, but how weird would that be to sit Siemens down in a chair and try to get from them, what did you do during COVID? Did you put your life at risk? Did you go extraordinary measures to go fix a hospital, right? What was in it? Why did you do that? I know it'd be hard to get an answer,
Yeah.
It's hard to do that.
We run a corporation.
Yeah.
We have to make money or we
Yeah.
can't stay in business. We have to have money to pay employees.
Yeah.
But this business is not about money.
Right.
I mean, we have to make a profit, but it's not about extraordinary money. It's more about patient care. It's more about providing a crucial medical service.
Yep.
And so when it comes down to it, that's really what we do here.
Yeah.
Fast performance, fast uptime response, more time that they can run the scanner, more patients that can be seen.
Yeah.
It's a simple equation, because the more patients they can be seen,
Yeah.
the easier it is for them to afford us to fix the machine.
No,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's a complete circle.
I agree. And this responsibility that we've taken, right? We take it seriously. And again, you can't talk to you and not feel that, right? And that's where, again, this is a great medium, I think, the social media and getting this out there. This is just you, raw. You don't change.
Right.
You're the same person that walked through the door on the video camera,
Well, that's the greatest part about this. All the depositions and all the legal stuff, they keep wanting the story to change.
Right.
I'm like this. I said, listen, I told you the truth on day one.
Yeah.
I'm telling you the truth now. The story's not going to change, because the truth is the truth.
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
I can't make up anything new for you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell you the way it rules and how it rolled out. And this is why I did what I did. And this is what I did. And I told him exactly. I said, did I bypass your software? Sure. 2 or 3 times after you implemented this software, I wanted to see if I could get around it so I could install the machines.
Yeah.
Zip.
Yeah.
And I told my customers, I said, I can't get around it. Let's downgrade your software. So now somehow Philips is trying to make it illegal to downgrade the software.
Oh,
And let's bypass the software. Now they're going to find some way to bypass the software.
Sure.
Let's give them a new set of software. They said, well, you're stealing our software. I'm like, come on now.
Yeah.
The software is very plain, right? The software is no different than you go to Best Buy and you buy a copy of Windows XP.
Okay.
That's their software,
Okay.
right? All right. So then you peel the sticker off the back of the Windows XP disk and you put your license code in.
Okay.
It's exactly the way the Philips software works.
Okay.
So when I sell you, let's say that you bought a hard drive with software on it.
Mhm.
It would have been the baseline software.
Okay.
It won't work without a license key.
Okay.
It's not illegal because I didn't give you any options. I didn't give you any components of the software. Nothing's going to work until you put a license key in there.
Okay.
So if I'm selling you a new drive with software on it, until you put your license key in that you got off your old software, the software's not going to function.
Right.
So a lot of these plays that they're making are just rabbit holes. They're ways to make me spend money to explain what's going on, but they know what's going on.
Right.
This is the funny part, is they know exactly what's going on.
Exactly.
This is all a big game
Yeah.
to outspend the little guy and try to put him out of business, not because of fact,
Yeah.
but because of finance.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we all live in the United States, and we all know that's where our legal system has gone over the last 20 years.
Right.
It's not a matter of right and wrong.
Yeah.
It's a matter of who has the most money.
Yep.
And think about it for a second. Why would a $4 billion company care about me?
That's right.
I
You're
mean,
exactly right.
put it in a nutshell. Why would they care about me? Do they think my market is so great that somehow I'm hurting a $4 billion company?
They don't. They
So-
don't. I mean, if you find a roadmap, that's probably what they're scared of. Is this guy going to give us other people a roadmap to follow to do the same things and then scale, right? That's what they're scared of. So they're trying to stop you by outspending you. But like you said, the judge has to figure out what's going on. It takes time for her to get her, head wrapped around, the whole details of this. And, it's hard. She's not going to expert in our field. So she's got to take cues and, but if they keep throwing stuff at her, right, it's going to distract from the real point.
And it's always a distraction from fact.
Yeah.
All of the lawyer games,
Yeah.
it's a play of paper.
Yeah.
It's, can I talk about this? Can I talk about this? Can I talk? if it's federal regulation, why couldn't I talk about federal regulations in an open court?
Sure.
But you talked about LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Honestly, the people that follow me on LinkedIn, the people that ask the questions, because I've been pretty vocal on LinkedIn for years.
Yeah.
Typically, I'm followed by biomed guys. I'm followed by imaging guys. I'm followed by MRI guys. We train MRI. The funny thing is Philips won't offer training to us, but we offer Philips training to others. But since this litigation started, we'll just backtrack to last year. My greatest followers and the people that are looking at more information on LinkedIn than anybody else are the CEOs and the CFOs of Philips and Siemens and Hitachi and Canon and GE. And the reason is they all know what this litigation means to all of them.
Right.
This is a pack of cards.
Yep.
If Philips gets put in a situation where they have to abide by the federal regulations, then all these other OEMs know, without a doubt, the world is coming to them too.
Yeah.
And that's partly, it's not a great fight for me, but when I've been writing these letters for the last 15 years, I've not just wrote them to Philips.
Yeah.
They've gone to Philips, they've gone to Siemens, they've gone to Hitachi. Hitachi is a big scorner. Sure. Hitachi's never given anything out.
Wow.
And so they've got a very bad reputation on service. Yeah. They've got a very, and this goes, there's good stuff on your story here because it goes to another component. Hitachi has one of the worst resale values in the United States because everybody that knows that if you have a Hitachi, the only person that can service is Hitachi.
Right.
So if you have a battle with Hitachi, they won't sell you parts. They won't help the service guy. So you can buy a brand new Philips. I'm going to give you a perspective. You buy a brand new Ingenia. You pay $1.9 million for a brand new Ingenia. In 3 years, you can sell that Ingenia for like $900,000. We're going to reverse that role. You buy a brand new Hitachi, $1.5 million. You're going to buy a brand new Hitachi. 3 years later, you're going to have to bring it to the scrapyard because there's not anybody that's going to offer you any money for it.
Right.
They can't take it out. Nobody can reinstall it. The only person that can reinstall it is Hitachi, and Hitachi is going to charge you $500,000 to pull it out and move it.
Right.
Where typically somebody like me would charge $200,000 to pull it out, store it, bring it back in, reinstall it. So, you've got a huge difference in cost. Again, it typically is 30 to 40% of the OEM cost. So when you're talking about a small-time imaging center or a small rural hospital, that's who our primary clients are. Those are the people who just can't afford the Mercedes.
Right.
They have to go with Cadillac.
That's right.
And
that's right.
And that's just the background.
The ones that can afford it least are going to be impacted most.
Especially when you get to a rural hospital, because not only do they hit them with upfront cost more, but every service call is more. Every drive is more because they're in a rural location.
Yeah, and there's nobody else. If they can't make it because they're on another call, you're stuck for a week or two.
And if you don't have full service contract, that timeline, since they know they have to drive 5 hours to get there, you're not going to be on their pecking order. Yeah. They're going to get there when they actually get there. You're not prioritized at all.
Yeah.
So a lot of times rural hospitals typically have backups, and their backups are a mobile scanner that can come in.
Right.
So a lot of times a rural hospital go down, they'll be down for a week, where typically if they're in a big city, they'll be down for 1 day.
Exactly.
They might be down for a week where they have to bring a mobile in because they just have to get some MRIs or CTs done.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword for rural hospitals, and those are the ones that are getting hurt with the Medicare reimbursements. Those are the ones that are getting hurt by these implementations of safety issues where they don't have any other choice on service besides the OEM. If you remember, Ford tried this on third-party parts. So they said, okay, listen, you can buy a Ford part to repair your car and we'll honor the warranty, but if you buy one from a third-party vendor, we're not going to honor the warranty. The government's already ruled on this. The government said you can't do that. They've already said that you can't mandate somebody buys your part. Now, the word on the grapevine is next year Philips is going to implement serial numbers on their parts. So that you'll need a key code to install a part, and any part won't work. The part will actually have to have an internal serial number that coincides with the system. So the system sees that part ID, and it won't work with any other part except that part ID. Oh my gosh. So if things don't change, it's going to get worse before it gets better. I can assure you.
Right, because they'll get better at this.
Yeah.
Right. You're right. Timing is
and I want to make sure you harp on this. Yeah. It's not, Philips is not alone.
I agree.
Siemens and GE and Hitachi are all doing mirrors of the same thing, just at less intervals. Siemens was sued years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
So if you talk to a corporate manager, they said, well, we're going to just follow suit. We're going to do what is required and go on with our life, because I want to say that they've lost $18 million in litigation about 18 years ago doing this exact same thing.
Okay.
Now, if we follow the TEC case, Philips already got hand slapped for about $3.8 million. Right. And it basically says, you guys didn't supply documentation. You guys didn't supply training. You guys held back on this. And unfortunately, in the United States, that's against the law.
Yeah.
So they've already been found guilty.
Yeah.
It's very apparent.
Yeah.
My personal opinion is the Sherman Act is going to come into effect. And so we've got some monopolistic activities that are not necessarily on board. It's just a matter of whether the court sees eye to eye with what I think. I think that Phillips is trying to orchestrate a monopoly in the industry and have a monopoly of parts and have a monopoly on this. And that may be legal in Europe where they're from, but it's certainly not legal here. Now, the funny thing is, right to work is already in Europe. So everything that they're suing U.S. companies for is completely legal in Europe.
Okay.
Yeah, they can't sue somebody in Europe for doing the same thing because the government says you already have to do this. Yeah. And that's where the right to work is going in the United States. Right to repair. Yeah, yes. So right to repair has already been there. It just hasn't encompassed medical devices as much as Europeans already have.
Right.
So it's coming to head. Yeah. And either our government's going to ensure that the end user is the primary purpose guy, or corporate America is the primary purpose guy. Yeah, and unfortunately, in the United States, it differs between the political affairs, right?
Yes.
Whether a Democrat or Republican in the office is just a matter of whether the government likes corporations better than people, or they like people better than corporations. But last time I checked, the Constitution says we, the people. So our government is still supposed to be a body of people controlling our government, not government controlling the people. So when I grew up, things were different.
Yeah.
I grew up and people had honor, and people had ethics.
Yep.
And we'll flash forward 20 years, and now money's more important.
Yep. And this is what happens when money becomes more important.
It's the root of all evils.
Yeah, you see this. You see this greed, and it's really what you didn't say it before, but that's what I picked up on. This is greed driven, and I think it's up to our country to protect us, the laws to protect us, and so the battle's right. I mean, I feel like there is a battle. If it's not here, it's coming, and we have to have it pretty quickly.
Yep.
Because what you said is true. The technology is going to take us down a path, and if we don't get it now, then it could get harder and harder in the future to get our arms around it. But I'll tell you, I've had a similar experience. I talked about the hourly rate for what they were charging for the OEMs, all of them, right? It's gotten ridiculous. I remember a few years ago, I could get something for $350 an hour, maybe $450 an hour, maybe $5, But now it's like you see $1,000 an hour pretty regularly from the OEMs, and
anywhere $695 to $1,195 an hour.
And they got mad. I mean, I heard through high-level people in our industry that they got mad at me, the OEMs, for just even saying that fact, And so there's pressure, and then they're sensitive to this.
Well, you want to see sensitivity? Pull one of their contracts out.
Yeah.
Right. When you pull their contract out, I have customers that say, "Well, Phillips will cover a quench, and Siemens will cover a quench." I'm like, "Have you read the contract?"
Right.
And the contract explicitly says we pay for 200 liters of helium per year.
Yep.
They don't say we don't cover quenches.
Yeah.
They simply say this is the max amount of helium we're going to buy a year.
Yeah.
Which pretty much means they're not paying for helium.
That's right.
And then it limits the hours.
Yeah.
Or they pay overtime. But the best part is the fine print at the very bottom. It says don't share this contract with anybody.
That's right.
Don't publicize it.
Yep.
And if you publish it, you're violating your agreement in this contract. You can't give this to anybody. In your case, to share with the public. Like this, somehow this shouldn't be public knowledge.
Right. Well, I do assessments for hospitals, and they give contracts for us to read so we can help them with how to manage the contract. Right. And so what I found is, not your example is exactly right, but I also found that if you look at the chillers and you get into that world, the hospital is sometimes responsible for replacing the glycol in the chillers, right? And it's a small fine print there. And so what happens when something quenches and they blame it on the glycol refill and the chillers? I mean, there's these details that they know people aren't reading. They're not there helping them with that.
Without a doubt, there's if you read the contract, and I do the same thing with my customers. I said, listen, you're not comparing my contract to their contract because it's not apples to apples. Right. In our contract, we're paying, helium. Your helium consumption per year is about 700 liters. That's what we're obligated to pay. Phillips is not even going to offer the obligated amount that you would normally use in a given year.
Right.
And that's not to include if your chiller fails or if your cold head shuts off or unless you have some of these other issues.
Right.
And without a doubt, electrical is excluded.
Yep.
HVAC is excluded.
Yeah.
Chillers are excluded.
Yeah.
Anything that if any failures on the MRI are associated with that, not only do they not pay it, not only do they not have to show up, but let's say that, for instance, you were talking about the chiller. So let's say the chiller goes out that causes a failure on the compressor.
Yeah.
Now they're not going to cover the hardware failure of the compressor either.
Right.
You're going to the customer's going to have to buy that. Helium is now $30 a liter or $50 a liter, depending on where you live.
Right.
They have to cover that.
Yep.
They're not going to refill it.
Yep.
If the magnet quenches, they're not going to cover that.
Yep.
So it's a domino effect. And unfortunately, these bigger hospitals don't find that out until something catastrophic happens.
Yeah.
And they say, well, I thought I had a contract. And the OEM says, you did have a contract. It's just 90% of this is not covered.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's a marketing ploy, right? Because they're only covering portions of the equipment, and they've got this long list of exceptions, and they've got these terms and conditions that take away from that full service. So
Correct.
It's a great marketing ploy because it's really gotten people to think that, yeah, I'm covered. I got a full service contract that I'm paying a premium for, so I'm covered, right?
Right.
And it's actually hurting us because nobody reads their contracts, But it's not full service. Full service is, what if there's a pipe that busts in the floor above? They're not going to cover that.
Right.
So their liability at the hospital level, especially the rural hospitals, is a different kind of loss besides the 8 to 5 Monday through Friday that they're packaging for profitability.
Right.
Right. That's just
the biggest gain that you get from a full service contract, the biggest gain, and honestly, is really not monetary.
Yeah.
It's priority.
Yeah.
It's priority on the pecking order.
Yeah.
The main thing that you gain with the service contract is the OEM or us or any provider sees you as number one on the pecking order, because since you're giving them a monthly check, and since you're basing your budget on that check, you have to give them priority, because when you set up a company and you set up your profit analysis and you see where your costs are, you assign them a cost. You can budget their costs, and you can proactively, assuming that you're doing your job, you could proactively do repairs that are coming up.
Yeah.
So the OEM, you gave the example, so I'm going to finish.
Yeah.
In my world, since I'm really not geared to money as much as I am to making sure the machine works, I'll proactively change their code out. I'll proactively change components that may not have failed yet.
Yep.
Where the OEMs, even though they have a full service contract, they're not going to change a component until it fails, because they're going to try to maximize the amount of money they can make prior to having changed the part. This is the greatest part. So we took over a contract. You were talking about Crothall, and I'm not sure if you can put Crothall on the list, but we took over a contract for Crothall. Now, we took over the contract in August. In February, Phillips was notified that this thing was going to come off a contract. They had a bad cold head, high pressure on the magnet. From February. February, March, April, May, June, the hospital called them and said, listen, we've got high pressure on the magnet. This is a 4K cold head. It's not supposed to have high pressure. So for months, Phillips would come out there and bleed it down and make some adjustments, never changed the cold head, never did the service. And then the contract went away. And, now Crothall's got this problematic magnet, and Phillips claims that it's not us.
Yeah.
And of course, Crothall did the right thing. They took a $30,000 loss up front to get the components changed that Phillips didn't change for 6 months, because they knew they were going to lose the contract, and they didn't want to invest any more money on that site.
Yeah.
And they do that often.
Yeah, they do.
And to discount it, if we had a contract with you and we knew we were losing it, we may have some proactive things the last 60 days.
Yeah.
But there's no way that we would proactively start trying to exclude things 6 or 7 months in advance.
Right.
We have a contract with you to keep your equipment working.
Yeah.
We do this for a living.
Yeah.
We know there's detrimental effects if we start weaning you off a service, even though you continue to pay. Now keep in mind, Phillips was getting paid from February to August. They just weren't providing any service or parts.
Exactly.
So they were trying to make their profit for that physical year by not doing what they said they were going to do instead of doing it proficiently.
Yeah.
So
that's a challenge with prepaying for the hospitals, right? If they're truly trying to save money, there could be money in taking financial risks, right? There could be. But the problem is, like you're saying, it gets you further down on the pecking order, right, for service. That becomes a challenge.
The best thing that we've come up with typically is what we call a shared risk contract, where it's full service contract, shared risk.
Yeah.
So we give you a 40% discount on the contract, but any parts that you need, you have to pay for half of them.
Yeah.
And that way it works out, because how insurance is sold.
Yeah.
So insurance says you're going to lose money 1 out of 3 years, and you will. Service contracts will benefit you 1 out of 3 years.
Yep.
And the other 2 years, statistically, service businesses stay in business because you're going to make money 2 of the years. You're going to lose money 1 of the years. And at the end of the day, according to the principles of insurance, life insurance, sales insurance, car insurance, all of it's based on the same thing. The idea is, if you pay a premium for 3 years, you're going to make profit for 2 years, and you're going to lose money 1 year. And we hope that the profit we made in 2 years exceeds what we lost the first year.
That's right.
And that's the basic principle.
Yeah.
And the principle is, we should make 1/3 profit each 3 years of what we're charging. And so that's the idea. Now, it can flip, but the bigger group of policyholders you have, the less risk you have. So the more service contracts you sell, the less risk you have overall of losing money, because they kind of balance each other out.
Yep. Yeah.
And so that's the problem with being a small guy.
Yeah.
Is because you have less contracts to balance you out. So you've got to be more proficient and more cautious on your repairs to make sure that you don't have any big failures.
Yeah.
Where the OEM doesn't care if they have any big failures, because remember, the guys who are actually doing the work have no skin in the game.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So,
no, I completely agree with you. I agree with you, man. Yeah, this is something that I look forward to talking to you more about. We'll follow the case, and we'll definitely anything we can do, here to get the right attention, because I have a feeling that the fight is gonna, I call it a fight, but what we're gonna go through, the attention could be helpful to have our industry,
the problem with our industry, and it's the same thing with the OEM.
Yeah.
Philips is fighting this fight, and all the other OEMs are watching.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when it comes to our companies, right? Even though that all the companies in this industry know what I'm doing is going to be beneficial for them all.
Yeah.
It's strange to see them have no backbone.
Yeah.
Even I can name a few names, but there's a few vendors out there, and there's a few third parties out there that are in cahoots with the OEMs enough that they won't stand up and say, this is just right and wrong. This is simply a right and wrong issue.
Yep.
What you're doing is wrong.
Yep.
Because everybody can read the federal statute.
Yep.
I mean, that was one of the first things Philip says. Well, are you an FDA expert? I said, no, but I can read.
Yeah.
It's in black and white.
Yeah.
It's in a printed book.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how complicated it is. It's very plain. It says you shall in the Constitution, shall in the Bible says you will, basically.
Right.
It says you will. It doesn't say that you might or you may. It says you will.
Yeah.
So it's got a legal termination to it. The legal definition of shall is you must.
Well, what constitutes an expert? That's what I want to know. It's like you're compared to me, you're an expert, But,
well, according to Phillips, I guess there's no experts, because they said the expert witness said this and expert witness said that. I said, well, maybe you should hire me as an expert witness, because it seems like your expert witnesses don't know your own equipment.
That's what I'm saying.
So, I mean, it's very convoluted. But like I said, I told you this earlier, I don't think Phillips has anybody in their company that's worked on all the MRIs that they've ever made.
Yeah.
Yet they're non-expert. Me,
yeah.
I guess I'm a non-expert, but I've worked on every MRI that they've ever manufactured.
Right. Yeah. So only way to be an expert is to work for Phillips.
I guess
that's what I'm gathering, right?
Well, I told you the story earlier. They told me, Marshall, why are you so good at troubleshooting? Which OEM did you work for? How long did you work for Phillips? And I said, I've never worked for an OEM. And he said, strangely, he said, well, I guess that's why you don't have any bad habits.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, no, and I think go back to the backbone too of the rest of the industry. I mean, I've been in those meetings, I've been an executive at these companies, and it doesn't even come up like that. You know what I mean? Having been in those rooms, having these discussions, they're just worried about protecting the bottom line. That's it. There's no right or wrong that comes up in those discussions, unfortunately, in my experience.
It's all about money.
It's just all about, are they going to help us grow, or are they going to take something away from our company? But the patient's not talked about, and this is where it gets to become a shame. It's now the money's infiltrated the ISO world in its own way. So we're not all impervious to, the money hurting or guiding our principles, And
we all have to make money.
Yeah.
But we all don't have to make all the money.
That's right. That's right. Right. And I think there's a reckoning. I mean, the administrators I've gotten close with over the years, they're not maybe being boisterous right now, but they're taking notes. And they're gonna remember this at some point. And when it comes time for them to make a move, I think they'll make the right move,
Well, 15 years ago, they talked about patient care. They talked about image quality.
Yeah.
They talked about, are the machines functioning correctly? Are they functioning within specifications? I can tell you how many years I've heard nothing about those things.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I've heard a whole lot of things. And in fact, I was at a site in California. There's a doctor in California that does everything. I first started on GE, so yeah. I can make a little joke about them. And GE was always good enough. So, the doctor up in California, he does stuff just good enough. And I looked at him, and I said, you're a frickin' doctor. I said, don't you care about the image being correct? Don't you care about the anatomy being correct? You can't have an MRI that's good enough. If your machine's not calibrated and you can't tell the difference between 1 millimeter tumor and a 3 millimeter tumor, how can you as an MD say that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing as far as patient care?
Right.
And in his platform, he's a sad doctor. And I've met quite a few.
Oh, yeah.
The good thing in my business, I've met lots of doctors, some really, really good, some really, really patient caring, and some could give a two shits.
Yep.
They're more concerned with the revenue they're going to get from an MRI referral than they have anything to do with actually reading the MRI.
Oh yeah.
And our population has changed. I tell this story all the time. I said, you go to Argentina, you go to Costa Rica. We do the machines in Costa Rica. We run hundreds of patients. But let's just say 100 patients get scanned in Costa Rica. Of the 100 patients, 90 of them have findings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 10 of them, nothing. 90 of them have something wrong with them. We're going to take that same population group in the United States, 100 MRIs. There's probably less than 30 of them that have findings because doctors are scared of getting sued.
Yeah.
They want referrals from, they want, I call it lunch money, right?
Yeah.
Because the money they get from referrals has nothing to do with their practice.
Yeah.
This is all, it's sort of like the drug company giving them money to prescribe drugs.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's kickback.
Yeah. Hey, this is your host, Danny Mobley. Thanks for watching Humans of Healthcare. Please subscribe below for more great interviews.